The first model of discrimination that we can take a look at comes from Gary Becker, and it was actually part of his thesis at Chicago, at the University of Chicago. So let's go ahead and see what he says about discriminating firms and non-discriminating firms and about economic discrimination in the long run. So Becker's theory of discrimination is also called the discriminatory taste theory. Discriminatory taste theory. Taste theory. Made by Gary Becker. So here, Becker. So the discriminatory taste theory can divide people up into two different categories, or divide firms and corporations into two different categories. We have discriminating firms and non-discriminating firms. Not very imaginative. So here, take a look at discriminatory firms first. So discriminatory firms. And what do you think discriminatory firms are going to do? They are the ones that are going to discriminate. So employers who discriminate against a particular group. Employers who discriminate against a particular group, and it doesn't really matter what groups that we're sort of taking a look at. And they will lose market share and profit opportunities because they do not hire the best employees available. So here, and they will lose market share and profit opportunities because they do not hire the best workers or employees available. Because they do not hire the best employees available. The best employees available. So this is a very simplified version of how Gary Becker described these discriminatory firms. Employers who discriminate against a particular group, and they will lose market share and profit opportunities because they do not hire the best employees available. So imagine that you're in a classroom, and we can divide the classroom up into two different parts. We have the left-hand side of the room and the right-hand side of the room. And I'm going to be a discriminatory firm right here. And I want to discriminate against people that sit on the left-hand side of the room. So that means I'm sort of limiting my options of who I can choose in terms of hiring as an employee. I've limited the supply of labor to only the right-hand side because those are considered my preferred workers or my preferred employees. And if I want to hire my preferred employees, that means I am losing out on a subset of people that are the best employees, because we know that the best employees or the best students are scattered throughout the entire room. There are some on the left-hand side and there's some on the right-hand side as well. However, by limiting myself, I've eliminated half of the room, the left-hand side, and can only choose from the right-hand side. So I choose the best employees on the right-hand side, but I'm also going to have to choose from a subset of employees that are not as great on the right-hand side because they are my preferred choice. I am segregating you guys into the sort of separate rooms here. I'm discriminating against you. And because I do so, that means I'm going to lose some type of market share and profit opportunities because I don't hire the best employee that is next in line. So what does this say about the other firms, say the non-discriminatory firms? That just tells us that we're going to have some type of implications about firms that discriminate against employees and firms that don't discriminate in the long run. And we'll get to that conclusion very shortly. So the other firms that we can talk about are these non-discriminating firms, as we've already mentioned. So non-discriminating firms. Non-discriminating firms. And like the name implies, not very original, non-discriminating firms, they are the firms that are not going to discriminate against anybody. So if I'm a non-discriminating firm and we're taking a look at the same classroom, that means I'm always going to hire the best employees available on the left-hand side of the room and on the right-hand side. I don't discriminate. I'm always going to choose the best employees that I believe will fit my needs the most. Because I don't discriminate at all, or these non-discriminating firms don't discriminate at all, they're going to have lower costs. They have lower labor costs. And they attract more productive managers and employees. So have lower costs and attract more productive managers, more productive, and we'll say an efficient employees. So more productive and efficient employees. So that just tells us that you probably are going to have better market share. You're going to have more profit opportunities if you don't discriminate against the employees, trying to have your preferred employee on this in this sort of case. So take a look at the discriminating firms and the non-discriminating firms. If this situation happens over a long period of time, what does Gary Becker, his model, sort of insinuate about what should happen? If these discriminating firms continue to discriminate, they're losing profit share. If these non-discriminating firms don't discriminate, they're going to get better employees, and in time, they should overtake these discriminating firms. And that's exactly the conclusion that he draws out from his thesis. He says that the pressures of market competition should drive discrimination, economic discrimination, down to zero in the long run. Because if the discriminating firms keep on discriminating, that means they're losing profits, they're losing market share, and all the best employees that are going to be available. However, how true does this conclusion hold in the real world? Have we completely eliminated discrimination in the workplace? And the answer is no, of course not, because this is just a model, but it helps to explain quite a lot of the differences in the wage gap that might appear nowadays. And the reason why Gary Becker's conclusion, or his sort of thoughts about this particular model, about what should happen in the long run, don't necessarily hold true all the way, is because there are a lot of things that could be added to his theory. So there are a few limitations. What didn't he include that we should be including in a more realistic model? So one thing that he didn't include were adjustment costs. So adjustment costs of firing unproductive workers and hiring new workers can be exorbitantly high. So what are a few reasons why employers may not fire these unproductive or inefficient workers? That's because if you want to fire these workers, you typically have to pay them some type of severance. You have to give them 2 weeks notice, and the cost can be very, very high, especially if the employee is a part of a union. So the firms, the corporations, they don't really want to go down that path, and they just say, okay, just keep on with this unproductive worker, and we really won't have to deal with these additional costs. So that's something that should be considered. And even if they want to hire a new worker, there are costs associated with trying to find a best employee as well. That means they have to have someone to have a search, they have to have someone that interviews the employees, they have to train the new employee. So there are a lot of costs associated with firing and hiring new workers, and that can be a reason why we do see these unproductive workers in very high management positions and having very high paid jobs. The next 2 points sort of combine with one another. So women may be less mobile than men and less willing to accommodate employers' demands, and women may continue to choose more flexible career paths that do not penalize extended absences from the labor market. So this just tells us that women and men are very different from one another. Women have different needs and wants in the workplace than men do, and if we are different from one another, that just tells us that we are going to have a wage gap or a gender pay gap that is always going to be there, because we are not necessarily the same identical person, because we have different needs and wants in the workplace. Maybe sometimes we want to start a family, or women may be a little bit more family oriented. So if they want to be a little bit more family oriented, they may self-select into careers that don't penalize extended absences, and they self-select into the careers that may not necessarily pay as much as the men's career paths. And we'll take a closer look at this hypothesis in the next theory in the model as well. So all of these are sort of a few limitations of Gary Becker's model, which can be included in a more realistic model, things that we should be taking into account for, and can explain why there is still a sort of gender pay gap, or a pay gap just in general between different groups and people nowadays.